Hi guys, welcome back to my Steps to Sobriety, the show on YouTube channel and as a podcast with me, your host, Stefan Neff. Today is another day for an interview and I'm dead excited to have Dr. Alice Kerby with me. Alice, it is an absolute honor to have you on the show because I know that your work is helping so many women out there to live a different life after trauma. And there is such a need, unfortunately, out there because this world is at the moment not a nice world. And maybe today we can plant another few seeds in some beautiful minds that hopefully grow and develop into the means that gives women, but also any other person out there who needs it, the power to take the first steps. So Alice, welcome to my show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Alice, first of all, let's talk about your background and the many strings to your bow. Just describe yourself and give me your qualifications. Not just me. Give everyone your qualifications, please.
Good thing I have my resume here. No,
That's right.
I don't. No, thank you for asking. I'll do it in a nutshell. So I'm a doctor of physical therapy and I'm a health consultant and a somatic experiencing practitioner in training. And for those that may not know what somatic experiencing is it's a form of trauma healing. So that's a three-year additional training program that I'm almost through. I have, I think, 3 more modules left to go, but it's wonderful training. It's based on the work of Dr. Peter Levine and really works with healing trauma and healing chronic stress from a body-based method and from working with the autonomic nervous system and the body's physiology versus just working with the conscious and cognitive mind. Because a lot of times with trauma and with chronic stress, these patterns really will get dialed into our nervous systems and into our physiology and into our implicit memory. And so we may not have any conscious recollection of these events, but yet we still find ourselves playing out these old patterns or old habits and finding them really difficult to break because, on some level we may be responding from a place of survival, from these survival mechanisms that got dialed in long ago. So I do a lot of that work. I'm very passionate about it, obviously, because I just jumped right into talking about it.
And that's beautiful. That's exactly why we two are here. You listeners out there, it's now 6:40 now, and so we started shortly after 6 in the morning. And no, I'm not a morning person in the best of circumstances. Now for Alice, it's afternoon, but it shows that we go the extra mile to actually connect in such a way that we can share it with you guys. So we are all very passionate about our missions and our visions. So, and that is just beautiful. So Alice, you are clearly right now a woman on a mission, no doubt about that. But how did it all start? And what did young Alice wanted to be when she grew up? And I really mean young, sort of, 12 or so. What were your hopes and dreams then?
It's funny because when you said young, I was thinking back to like 6. I think I have a strong connection with my 6-year-old self still to this day. I really just always loved, and it's things I still love. I loved playing outside. I loved playing in the woods. I think I had dreams to maybe be a ballerina, to ride horses. I don't remember really having very strong sort of career-oriented visions for my future when I was real young, but I always really loved playing outside. Like that was kind of my thing, was to get up in the summer and like go to these woods we had nearby and like build forts and just be out there all day, like sweating and play with my friends and running around and getting muddy and dirty. And, I still really love all of that.
Cool. So, last time I looked, there are very few career paths that involve playing with your friends and getting sweaty and muddy. There are
maybe
few.
rugby, maybe? Is that a career?
Oh, it is. It is. New Zealand, hell yes. Hell yes. So, fair call. I'll give you that, actually. No, but so that was probably destined to be your spare time. So what did your parents say you ought to look into? Or what did your school counselor, what did people sort of around you guide you into? What did you end up doing?
I mean, I honestly don't. I really didn't have a strong feel. I'm thinking even of when I was in high school, I really enjoyed biology. I liked science, and that certainly played a factor in me continuing on to get my doctorate with physical therapy. I loved dissection. I remember I was in an AP biology class and we got to dissect a cat, and that was super cool and really interesting to see how the inner workings of the body, of this cat body. And um, so I had sort of a desire to learn more about the human body and the human condition. And as I got a little bit older and did more traveling and started studying with these various organizations around the United States and down in Central America around different methods of healing, I also became incredibly interested in the mind and in things like behavior change and in what would really affect us to create changes in our life, and what would really hold people back, and then how did that relate to the body. So I feel like I've had that interest for most of all of my adult life, really. But I think
Wow.
some of that was brought forward from being a kid and being really active, and then also doing some of those science classes. But I always really liked literature too. I don't know what I thought I would be. I went to a liberal arts college when I was 18. I don't know that I had an idea of what career that would go into. It was this really small school based on the great books, and it was a kind of a really weird education. Yeah, it was kind of bizarre. I don't think I would make that same choice like today. But it was
Yeah.
interesting. I like learning. I've always
Yeah.
really enjoyed learning. So it's interesting. It is quite interesting kind of where my path has ended up with the marriage of some of these things of science and behavior change and
Yeah.
the
And
mind.
yet there is the mind, yet there's the psychology. So it's obviously and from the classical training, sort of there is there are, in medicine you talk the body, and then there's psychiatry. And there's psychiatry is, for those of you not so really known, is really the diseases of the mind and how they are created and how they are treated. So that is psychiatry. But the psychology, oh yeah, there's a sprinkling of teaching there, but not much. Yet there is this clearly this link between the brain and the body, and this link is so powerful and so strong, as you have covered in your journeys. Yet it's maybe now coming in, but certainly not when I studied in university. We had no lectures on PTSD or the brain gut axis or any kind of things like that. No. Anything that they could not dissect out was clearly psychosomatic, which was nearly a swear word. So that is unfortunately a training that I went through, and we're talking the 80s here, 80s, 90s, shall I say, 90s. And I know that in the last 5-10 years, things have changed to a small degree, but unfortunately there's still a generation of teachers and mentors out there who are really in the medical world are not so supportive of alternative healing, of any kind of healing pathways in their own right. If you can't cut it out or can't give it a tablet, no, we don't talk about that. So it's a bit, unfortunately, there's something there that I have to acknowledge that unfortunately there might be a conflict of interest or some problem when it comes to doctors. Having said that, I, through a number of circumstances and reasons, have become very open to everything, basically. And this is a very beautiful place to be. So those of you out there who have got strong beliefs and strong convictions one way or the other, maybe just open your mind a little bit and listen to what Alice and I are saying, and if it is a bit different to what you believe, hey, this might be a cool thing. This might be a good thing. So back to you, Alice, because Alice, there is no way in hell that you would have one day decided, oh, I just want to do PTSD, and yeah, that sounds interesting. There is always a reason that we go for certain paths. Are you happy to share a bit why you suddenly became very interested in trauma care or aftermath care?
Sure. I think when I started this training, it wasn't so much the fact that it was trauma based. It's more the fact that it was a very body based method
Mm.
to help people get rid of some of these chronic patterns. And with some of what you were saying with the medical industry too, I have to touch on that because I'll do it briefly. I think the concept that some of these things even are considered like alternative medicine is it's so silly.
Mm.
Just because there's been research, I don't know if you're familiar with Candace Pert. She was one of the original researchers that was studying neuropeptides, like I think back in the late 70s or early 80s. And
Mm.
she actually had all this research that was talking about the brain body gut connection. And she was way ahead of her time. But it's interesting that even though there's well established research, it still isn't mainstream. It still isn't even a corner of the
Mm.
mainstream. And so I'm really glad there's functional medicine practitioners and a lot of MDs and DOs and other medical professionals that are looking at some of these things and are able to look outside the box a little bit. And I like to say that because I think it's important to note that there is solid and substantial research on these things. As an evidence-based practitioner, that makes me pretty excited.
Mm.
Yeah, so with studying trauma, the somatic experiencing work felt like a really natural progression for me. And I came into finding it like when I was first getting sober myself. And so, I haven't had any big, huge moments of trauma in my own life. But we all, I think, go through these sort of, you could call them micro traumas. You can call them trauma with a little t, but just the way that we perceive events and how we respond to them, it can be, our bodies will process them as trauma or perceived trauma. Some people say that, particularly when we're children, things will happen and we may not know how to process them. So we'll go into one of these autonomic nervous system responses. We'll go into a state of freeze. That happens a lot with kids, or the fight or flight. And then these responses will get bound up within our own physiology and within our nervous system. So I'm sure I had a good deal of that. I think most of us do. I think it's kind of impossible to go through life and not have some of that.
Mm.
And unfortunately, again, this isn't an area where we have a lot of education. We don't teach our children these things. And I think maybe that's opening up a little bit more, but I think this relates into addiction and into alcoholism a lot, because I think when we don't have these tools available to us and our body is kind of being continuously assaulted, where we're like constantly responding from a stress response or from a trauma response, and we just want to like get the hell out of it because it's so uncomfortable, right? So I think that's a big part of why alcohol can come in for people, because man, does that help get us out of our bodies. Like for a while it works really, really well. We're numb, it's pretty chill, it feels nice, like maybe it makes us more social, helps with our anxiety. I was a big drinker because I had so much anxiety for a while. I really loved alcohol to sort of calm me down. And so I'm taking a kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but that's what got me involved in it directly. Is like when I was first getting sober, I found my therapist, and she just happened to be a somatic experiencing practitioner. I'd never heard of it, no idea what it was,
Mm.
but I started doing that work with her, as well as started 12-step recovery around that same time. And it completely changed my life. I think the 12-step recovery really helped me to get sober, but then doing this somatic experiencing work, like, just got me back in my body and really helped me to build trust. And actually, I won't even say that next part, but it enabled me to build trust in my own body, because I now know how to listen to myself. And I think that's one of the biggest gifts that I can help facilitate for the women that I work with, is to teach them ways to start trusting their own bodies, because we're in our bodies all the time. And it's this wonderful barometer to the world around us. So like, why wouldn't we invest time learning how to be present within them? Yeah.
It's a beautiful way of putting it. You're so right. I mean, I could not agree more with you. Uh, what is intriguing here, you are a very active woman out there, yet the alcohol was soon helping you with your anxiety. Did you feel guilty about drinking, or what were the emotions that you linked with drinking when you were drinking more and more?
I mean, I think most people who've been through this recognize, I think we have a commonality in what we experience, particularly around emotions. And I don't think my story is that unique in them, in that I felt, shameful, and I felt, just miserable and raw on the inside, kind of desperate. Like I wanted to quit for quite a while. I really I couldn't figure out how to. And that's,
Hmm.
that becomes debilitating, and I think really knocked me down on another level and it brings up this thing of, is there something wrong with me? And am I crazy? And maybe I'm a horrible person. And so I had all of those kind of things going on. And, alcoholism is progressive. So mine certainly was no different, and just got worse. And pieces of my life would start chipping away and breaking off. And um, yeah, it was really depressing, and definitely I felt, just thinking of like my physical sort of reaction, is I felt really hollow on the inside. And I hear that described a lot as well. So I remember the first time I went to like a meeting, a 12-step meeting, and I had this little pamphlet afterwards, and I was like reading about alcoholism, and I was like, whoa, like I'm not crazy. I'm just an alcoholic. Like this all makes sense. And that was such a liberating moment for me. And to go to the speaker meeting was the first meeting I went to, and hear this guy share his story. And I was like, holy crap, it's not just me. It was such a relief just to know there were other people like me that dealt with this issue, and they were better, and they were getting better. So I had that hope, so yeah, it's much better not drinking. I
No
feel a
shit.
lot better these
No
days.
shit, Sherlock. Oh, really?
I know, it's like the obvious police.
Oh, no, no.
Yeah, but
And it's so bizarre, because here we are. We both experience exactly the same thing. You were a high functioning alcoholic. Obviously, you tried to keep your life together as much as you can. But I love the way how you put it, that some bits of your life got chipped away. And that is
hmm
the most beautiful description I could imagine, because it's this insidious, slow path. If it hits you like a bloody drain, then okay, you get it. Damn, yes. But if it is just slowly getting worse, that is the insidious part.
it's tough to recognize, and because alcohol is so socially acceptable,
Mm,
I hung out with the crowd of heavy, high functioning alcoholics, or maybe they weren't alcoholics, but heavy drinkers, who had really good professional jobs back in DC, and were lawyers and worked for Congress. And
mm,
but it was just really normalized to drink a lot. And so
mm,
it was kind of okay for a while, the way that it is. And then it just really isn't. And then it's
mm.
like, oh shit, I'm at the bottom of this well. How do I dig myself out?
It's beautiful. Did you? How did you end up at your first meeting? Did someone give you a helping hand?
So one of my best friends has been in recovery for, I think he's coming up on 13 years.
Oh, wow.
So he'd been sober for a while, and, he had seen my alcoholism progress. We'd taken a couple trips where it was pretty obvious, like,
Mm,
it was just
mm,
kind of getting worse. Um, and I'd gone through this traumatic series of events. I'd gone through a breakup, and I was moving, and I was like really sort of at that rock bottom, or my wits end, or the desperation was quite strong. And he said, I have this friend who's speaking at this meeting, and it's going to be in your town, and he's from there. And why don't you just go check it out? Cause he knew how desperate I was. I went and stayed with him for a few days, like when I was going through this breakup. And, we've been friends for 20 years. So he's one of those, he's like family. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go. So I went to this meeting. It was this big LGBTQ conference, and I didn't know anyone. It was this whole like huge room, and I just went in and sat in the back and listened to this guy talking, and it was great. Like after that was my sobriety date. I haven't had a drink since then, because again, he gave me hope, and the next day I stayed and I talked to him afterwards too.
Mm.
And I like waited in the line to talk to the speaker, and I went up and I was like, oh, I'm, so-and-so's friend. And he's like, oh, that's so cool. You came. And so that meant a lot too, just to like kind of hug him and yeah, just to know that I wasn't alone. Yeah. It was really important.
And it's such a weird disease, alcoholism, because it tells us all the negative things, but it tells us, shh, be quiet about it. It says no one will notice. You just keep hiding the things that you're hiding. You're so good in it. Honestly, no one will notice. Just get another bottle of vodka and just do it. What was your favorite poison?
Um, I don't know. At the end, I was drinking a lot of vodka mixed with vitamin water. So it was, low cal. Like and I see a lot of women talk about this. They're like, oh, I do this. And I'm like, just don't drink the vodka. I still can't drink vitamin water anymore. I'm like, it's too gross. But, and some days I really do miss beer. Like I love like good, tasty, like stouts and I don't miss it. Like I'm going to go drink one, but I'm like, I miss that experience of like a real good sort of chewy beer.
But that's of course the thing is there are very nice aspects to drinking.
Oh,
There
yeah.
is the social side. There is the taste, which is an acquired taste, but at the same token, if some tastes are beautiful. I miss a lovely wine, a strong wine from the Alsace, sort of a Gewürztraminer or something like that. Oh, yes, please.
Yeah.
So there are certain things which you just have to say, as much as a some yummy food will give you a wave of pleasure. There is certainly some taste can do exactly the same, and it just so happens that I'm rather allergic nowadays to alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
In the words of Downey Jr., I break out in handcuffs
Mm-hmm.
when I have some alcohol. I was not that bad. I was a high-functioning alcoholic, and I didn't end up with any DUIs or with any other kind of frictions with the law or whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess it's all a matter of time until
Yeah.
it hits you, isn't it? Bloody
Yep.
hell.
Yeah. I think that as well. I have a friend right now who's just a lovely, sober woman, and she's still dealing with like repercussions from over a year ago. And just as far as like custody of her kids, and
Yeah.
it's, this ex-husband who's really bitter. And I'm like, whoo, like that's admirable that you're just like walking the path of sobriety, like even though things aren't going your way and even though you're doing everything right.
Mm.
So I feel for people that do have more of those repercussions. Cause like you, I didn't really have any with, as far as legal or things like that, or, being put in jail, but certainly my life was suffering.
Mm. And hugely so. And
Yeah.
that suffering, it's interesting how you described the hollow aspect, because that was how I walked out of rehab. I got admitted to rehab because my wife basically said enough is enough, and I have organized rehab for you, and no, you do not have a choice. You will
Wow.
go on Friday. And so I ended up 28 days in rehab, and best thing ever that could have
That's
happened
great.
to me. Yeah. But I walked out and I was hollow. Exactly. I was a shell of a man.
Yeah.
And I used the 12 steps, and I used the a system of holding myself accountable. And I realized at a quite an early stage in rehab that I was a liar to my family. They had heard it all. No, 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 no. I did not drink. Truly, honey. But you smell. No, 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 no. That's ginger beer. That's and we come up with all this kind of bullshit. So I knew that words were not enough. I had to walk the walk. And in my book, I call it making living amends. You have to walk the walk, because words are cheap for any alcoholic.
Yeah.
So guys, now but I was a hollow shell, absolute hollow. There were no emotions, and it would take me probably the better part of 2 years to develop true emotions, true passions, true visions. I guess initially I was afraid of developing something positive in me. Maybe there was
Mhm.
still this intrinsic, oh, you're not a good man, you don't deserve
Mhm.
to be happy, all that kind of bullshit. There's only so much you can work in your 12 steps. You can work with healers, etc. But you need to that recognition that you actually deserve to be happy because you're doing now all the right steps, and the steps are in the right way and the right steps. So that took a while actually for me to become even a shadow of what I am right now. And wow, so yeah, 2 years. How long did it take you to come to change?
I think I made a lot of changes relatively quickly, and I think part of why is like one, I really, really wanted it. Like when I
Mm,
finally got sober, I was really like done and really desperate and really like I was just super willing, you know.
mm,
So that, and then I think working with my therapist and doing the somatic experiencing work, like along
mm,
with my 12-step recovery, really helped a lot
mm,
with, you know, again, being able to be in my body, being able to feel some things that, you know, maybe I wasn't able to feel, or I'd been holding back, or I wasn't sure how to let them in without being completely overwhelmed by them. And so going through that work at the same time was just,
mm.
I feel like it helped me. And like you said, not as much as I am now. Now I feel just quite like full of myself, really, in this way where I physically feel like I'm filled out in my being instead of being hollow. But I think I started coming back into that relatively quickly, like within a couple of months. And I certainly had ups and downs through it
Beautiful.
and all of that. But I feel like I started getting a glimmer of like, oh, this is me and this is, I can
Mm,
live this way. And I would just say yes to things. I would make myself go to sober events. And even if I didn't know people and it was
beautiful.
super awkward and uncomfortable, you know, and I live at this little beach town. So there'd be barbecues and before COVID, of course. And
Mm,
so I would just say yes to all of that. I went on camping trips. I just went and surrounded myself with people that had more sobriety than I did, and tried to have
beautiful.
some sense of social engagement. And I always recommend that to people. I'm
Yeah.
like, just even if it's not people that you have the most in common with or you feel the most comfortable with, just do it for a little while. Just
Mm,
surround yourself with it, and you'll find your people too. I think is what happens, which
mm.
is the community around sobriety is so, so important. I think it's essential,
Absolutely.
um, just to have
Abs-
other people going through the
eh,
same thing or just going through life sober.
so true. And we have forgotten how to do that, because alcohol was drenching every single aspect of our living. It was absolutely normal, and I loved how you said it. You you bring together a group of friends that are drinking at least as much as you or more, because that way you look normal. That way you
Hmm.
have got the perfect excuse. No, 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 no. Oh, I'm an alcoholic. Look at Joe over there. Oh,
Hmm.
oh boy. Can I tell you stories? And you tell stories about him because you don't really want to tell the stories about yourself. But
Sure.
that's another story in its own right. So no, you're so right. You're so right. And it is hard. It is hard to know how to do these kind of things. And I had a jump start in rehab because I was taught how to live that life by quite regimented living. Literally, you get up at 7:30, you have your breakfast, you will be in a meeting at 8, you will be there at 9. It was like school basically.
Hmm.
And but it is what we need. It is something that someone helps you with plans, with a model, with a structure that you can hold onto. The I need to play a bit my own trumpet here. My book, My Steps to Sobriety. It's, of course, one of the best books ever written.
That's what
I
I've heard
know,
about it.
I know, it's just, and so humble. I know, I know. Um,
Someone was just singing that from the rooftop over there. I was like, wow, he's right here. Got one of those big horns.
Yeah, that's like no. The reason I say that is I've put so many of my stories in there, and I've put so many action plans in there that essentially are there to help you guys look at your own life and think, "Damn, yeah, well, really, I should be social. How do I do that?" Well, there are heaps of suggestions in there. How do you deal with that? Because probably half of the book is about dealing with life. Yes, the other half of the book is alcohol and the 12 steps, but that is the alcohol side of things. That's really only one little aspect of your life, because it's all the other things that actually make you drink, or that cause the trauma, or that bring on the challenges. And I'm dealing with these challenges in half of the book, where we say, well, okay, how do you meet people that are sober? How do you deal with Christmas and the family that you can't stand, or the family that will drink? How do you deal with criticism? How do you deal with depression, with anxiety attacks, with all these kind of things that are normal in daily life? And I didn't have the answers when I was in rehab. You actually have to learn the hard way. How do you have actually fun? And every Tuesday night in rehab, no excuse, you went bowling. Okay. And I had after the first bowling, I went a bit too hard and injured my knee. And so there I was with this bloody painful knee. And I said, look, I can't bowl. No excuse. You come bowling. You sit on the side and you cheer up your team. And it was that kind of, okay. And it was the most bizarre experience for me, because there I was sitting. I couldn't distract myself physically. I couldn't actually bowl. I couldn't hold onto a drink and drink. And I was just sitting there actually having fun. It was a great night. And this was that was one of the wow, I can actually have fun. I can actually have a life without alcohol. Wow.
Yeah.
It's a cool experience. Love it, love it. So Alice, we need to talk more about the somatic, the body response, the autonomic nervous system, because that's sort of a thing that is so powerful in our life, yet we do not recognize it. We know bugger all about it. Quick medical introduction. The autonomic nervous system is part of the nervous system. So the nerves, and that the nerves are typically your brain, the spinal cord, and then the nerves that come out of the spinal cord and then make you do things like lift your arm. So that's information coming from your brain, or you touching something. Well, that's information going down the nerves or up the nerves to the brain and give you the information. So that's the nervous system in a nutshell. So there are these kind of things that you very consciously can do. And then there are things where you actually have no clue that they are happening. They're happening well below your conscious level. They are happening deep inside yourself. And there's heaps and heaps of that happening. We've got two systems there. One is the sympathetic nervous system, the other one, the parasympathetic nervous system. Fight and flight, relax, recreate, heal. So these are sort of the two big things when it comes to the nervous system that does the things that you do not control. So, and that is really that part of nervous system that is so powerful, because it can do so many weird things. For example, let's give you an example out there, guys. I'm sure you have been in a situation where you were so stressed that you physically felt sick. You might have even dry retched or vomited. Well, say hello to your autonomic nervous system, which has done its own little thing there, and it felt like that all this trauma, the body couldn't make much sense out of it, and your body actually, or your reptilian brain thought, hey, maybe it is something that I've eaten, something really nasty, something really awful, and let's actually bring that out, because that's the same thing. The vomiting means to bring something really bad out of the body. So I'll give you an example. That was the autonomic nervous system doing something in response to a really traumatic event, to a really traumatic emotion. And it's unfortunate, these kind of things, you alluded to that they can sometimes get ingrained, and like an old LP, like a vinyl record, jumping into the same groove again and again and again at a song that you really don't like, but you can't do anything about. Tell us a bit more about that.
Sure. So I think you did a really nice job explaining the nervous system, and the two branches of the autonomic nervous system, as you said, are the sympathetic and parasympathetic branch. And so our bodies and our biology were designed to move through these two branches. We're designed to like have moments of more excitement or activation, and then moments more of like settling or relaxation. And so the goal isn't really to be this, very chilled out. I'm always in this more parasympathetic state. I think the sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight portion, gets kind of a bad rap. Like it's always bad. It's not. It's part of our biological processes. We're supposed to be activated, more activated sometimes. If we're walking down the street and a car is coming at us, we better hope that system kicks in and we jump out of the way, right? Like it's there for a reason. But what can happen is that instead of processing those like more activating events, like maybe that example I just used, instead of jumping out of the way of the car, and then we stop for a minute and we let that energy of that charge kind of come back down into that more natural flow, we'll just keep going. And so maybe this will happen on the way to work. We're driving, a car tries to cut us off, we're like, "Arr!" Our system gets kind of spiked up, we're activated, then we go into work, then there's we grab a cup of coffee, and then we have a meeting, and then there's an email, and we have a deadline. And so it's like we never come back down. And you can even hear a little bit of that in my voice. I can feel my own system getting sort of activated just talking about it. And so notice, what's happening as you're listening to this. Just notice what's happening in your own body. And so the real key with some of this is to be able to allow our systems to go through that natural settling process. And Dr. Levine, who developed this work, did research with animals in the wild. And I frequently point to Robert Sapolsky's work as well, who's a biologist who's worked in Africa for decades and observed animal behaviors. But in the wild, you'll see the animal go through that response. They're running from the predator, whatever's chasing them. They get away, and then their body, they do what's called a little bit of a discharge. So they'll do a physical shaking. And so they let that response calm down and settle down. And so they go through that discharge period, and then they're back up and like walking around being an antelope or, a deer, whatever the animal is. And then they're on their merry way. And so they're not holding on to this prolonged stress response. And so that's a big issue for humans. And I think it's part of the reason why we have issues with autoimmune diseases. And part of the reason why we're just like a stressed out, sort of angry people a lot. And there's so many different anxiety disorders and things like that. So I think if we can start understanding a little bit more what's happening with our system, and this is part of the work that I do, I'm just wrapping up a 4-week course now that lays some of these very foundational principles. But we talk about something called the window of tolerance. And when are you in the tolerable window of ebbing and flowing throughout your day? Or when are you way up here and you're up here like with your foot on the gas 100 miles an hour all day, and you never let your system come back down? And then we're constantly like that groove in the record, like maybe we're up here. So that's a big part of the work, is being able to identify, understand those things, and work with our system to like be okay to come back down and relax. Because I don't think we know how to do that. It's like relaxation is this thing we do maybe at night or when we're on vacation, but it's not part of our day where we pause for a freaking second and notice when we actually like feel something nice or pleasurable. We're like, great, that's good. No problems to solve. What's the next thing? And then our brains are just off and running, trying to solve problems. We have this negative bias in our brains, right? So we're constantly trying to problem solve. But another part of what I teach is really to slow down those moments, almost like pressing pause when you feel like yourself, when you feel pleasure, when you're enjoying a warm breeze or a cool breeze on your skin, like actually feel what's happening in your body. Mm-hmm. And we can start retraining our systems then to not be on this super high state. We can retrain them to go more through those ebbs and those flows. So that's part of how I work with chronic stress and how this system and these techniques work. And then with trauma, you can think about an example I like to use is if you're a child and you walk by your neighbor's house every day and they have a dog that you're scared of, and the dog like runs to the fence and barks at you. And so you become quite terrified of this dog. And you may not have any memory of this as an adult, but maybe every time you see the same breed of dog, you find yourself going through some of those sympathetic responses. Your heart starts beating, you start sweating, you automatically cross the street and you no longer walk in front of that dog. So you can go through these trauma responses without having a conscious memory of what's happening, and how this can be detrimental. I mean, aside from that, you have to now cross the street every day, is that we will potentially start narrowing the opportunities or the experiences that are available to us because we're trying to avoid anything that brings us back to that state of trauma remembrance, if that makes sense. So it's like we close off our life force and our ability to have experiences because we don't want to get, and a lot of this is below the level of our conscious radar. It's that reptilian brain, it's the subconscious. And so we'll start, doing less because maybe we'll get close to any kind of a dog now. And it's like, oh no, this isn't safe. That's how our body will respond. This isn't okay. Like, I'm in danger. And those are deep rooted, like, survival patterns. There's no arguing with them. We can't rationally think our way out of them. So when we're able to start getting in there and working with the system, we can build our capacity for feeling and for being able to be present with these things and just have a sense of knowing what the heck's going on, like, oh, that's why I can't be in 10 feet of a dog anymore. And it can really be very profound. And I think when there has been years of drinking and alcoholism and all the shame and, the misery and that hollowness that comes with that, to begin to start, like, A, having an understanding of how this aspect of your body works, and B, really being able to start feeling and being present with yourself and moving through some of these things, it's like a whole new world becomes available. Kind of like what you were saying about sobriety and not drinking is one little piece of it, really, but then it's the rest of your life. What are you doing with the rest of your life?
Exactly.
And some people, especially at AA, like to say, like, oh, I'm just, some lady said this today, and like, I love AA. It's great. And also there are other things that are really great and really helpful. But I feel like sometimes there's this verbiage of just like, oh, just one day at a time. And I'm only just like doing this for other people. And it's like, yeah, but what about your life? Like, what are you creating? What are you passionate about? Like, you can live one day at a time and still be freaking like really passionate and really engaged in your own life. And I just bring that up because sometimes I find it as almost like an excuse to not actually take action on anything, which I think that then becomes like its own sort of pathological process.
It is, no doubt about it. It's and for those of us who have been to meetings, there is we joke a little bit about the one guy who knows it all, has been there for 25 years on every single meeting that there is, and he is still annoying as hell because he only talks about the same bloody things again and again because he is stuck in that rut. He is not doing anything to his life. The only way he's white knuckling it. That's how I call it, white knuckling, and just is a dry alcoholic. He has not done anything to his life, and that is really, really, really hard. And when I say he, I'm sorry, guys, there are enough girls out there who can be bloody annoying as well. So
women never.
No, never.
Charming, always charming.
Yeah, about that. No, I think the reality is you need to deal with your life.
Yeah,
and
you do.
The problem is if you're in the haze of alcohol or other drugs, it makes that bloody difficult. And it is so important to learn about your emotions and the physical changes that the emotions trigger in you. And that is exactly the work you are doing. And we see that, I mean, what you have described there beautifully is this kind of spreading response from the initial threat of that black dog with that red collar and those nasty eyes to every dog, to, oh, I better don't leave the house, to, it sometimes doesn't stop anywhere. And you just become really, really so deeply scared at such a fundamental level that you are completely crippled in your emotions. And no one will ever try to admit that and say, yes, I'm crippled. Hey. No, our brain comes up with some kind of excuse why you don't want to leave the house, etc. But it's still, the response is still the same, because if you hear a dog barking in this example, and suddenly your heart rate goes up to 150, and you feel your hands going all sweaty and clammy, and you become quite reffed. Exactly, that's the word, hyper vigilant. Hyper means far too much, and vigilant, of course, that you're aware of your surroundings. And hyper vigilant means, no, that kind of thing. So these are all the things that are probably not helping you to heal. These are probably these are very good signs and symptoms that something is wrong. So don't feel ashamed or guilty that you respond like that. On the contrary, say thank you very much, body. You are telling me that there is some serious work to be done. So let's start working, kind of a thing. So if you develop that kind of attitude, and if you actually say, wow, okay, that means that there is still a lot of unresolved issues. Wow, what an insight, guys. What a start. What a beautiful thing. Listen to this body of yours, because it tells you things left, right, and center. We just have forgotten how to listen, or we never learned how to listen in many cases of us. And that's where your work comes in. How do you find your patients, or how do the patients actually find you at the moment?
So mostly like the clients that I work with online, because most of my consulting work is online, especially now, but in general, because I work with people all over the world. So typically through social media, through my podcast, I will do frequently I'll do free events. I did like a free 5-day event at the start of COVID when we really first started going into lockdown. I did something called the ease experiment and had 5 days where I talked about some of these things and then really led people through a lot of different practices. So I think primarily people find me through social media, my podcast, my website. I guest frequently on podcasts. So I think people kind of come in from those various channels as well. And then I'm listed on the Somatic Experiencing website as a practitioner there. So sometimes people find me there. But I'm pretty active on social media. I'm, again, so passionate about this work. I talk about it all the time. I do live videos. I have a YouTube channel where I have some stuff, but it's hard for me to manage like a bunch of channels at once, a bunch of platforms. So I'm most active on Facebook and Instagram and somewhat on LinkedIn as well.
And guys, you don't need to remember any kind of handles. Just look down there into the description of the YouTube video or of the podcast, and you find the clickable links there. So don't hesitate and check out Alice's Instagram and other social media. I'm sure there is a hell of a lot that you can learn. I certainly continue to learn, continue to develop the insights. And this journey actually never stops. And that's so beautiful, because your body comes up with new challenges or let's rephrase that. The world decides to throw you new challenges, and they might look a bit different, and your body might try to jump back into the old rhythm and give you the same kind of old spiel to start off with. Oh, you need a drink, man. I mean, it's really getting bad. Oh, wow, look what the world is coming to. You better have a drink. Or, wow, you're so lucky. Let's have a drink. So there's the alcohol side, but also the same body reactions that you sometimes just have to catch out and nip in the bud. I had my own share of traumas. I had some PTSD. I find myself at least once a week having an anxiety attack. And I hate to label it like that, but I guess that's a nice description, because you just think, ugh, and you're hyperventilating and you're, oh. And I say, okay, thank you very much for reminding me on that it is not so great. And then I do some breathing exercises, and then I try to figure out, why am I feeling like that? And it typically turns out I haven't drunken anything. I'm hungry. I'm a bit overwhelmed from some situation that has occurred, but essentially I didn't take care of the basics in my life. And that's typically a start. So let's drink a bottle of water. Let's actually eat something. Let's do some breathing exercises, a bit of short meditation. Getting bye-bye anxiety attack. And these are the things that you want to learn. So take the anxiety attack as a sign from your body that either you stuffed up, or, whoa, there are things going on that you need to deal with, or a combination of both. And then learn what to do to help you under these circumstances. And there's so many things. It's not just a little bit of breathing out there. And that's where people like Alice can guide you so much, because there is, yes, of course, if you want to go into your lotus position and do some 20 minutes of meditation, that's quite nice. But if you're in a high-powered business meeting, yeah, it looks maybe a bit funny if you sit on the table. So therefore, what do you do under those circumstances? What do you do? So you need to develop strategies that will work for you in your setting. And there might be ways that you take some time out, which is ideal. If you allow yourself just 5 minutes to just say, look, can we interrupt the meeting for a moment, and we'll take a break, or take a breather, and toilet break kind of thing, make an excuse, and bang, you can do the work that you need. But there are so many ways how you can deal with that, and working with someone who has got the insight into the psychology, as well as can interpret how your body is responding, why it does that, how it does that, and explain that to you, can be so powerful, can be so gorgeous. So Alice, your work is so needed out there. And it's like a translator, I guess. You're a translator from a language that everyone is speaking. They don't know how to speak it, but their body is giving them signs and symptoms. And would it be not nice if you know that language a bit better, that you can actually respond the first time you get the warning message, not the 15th time when you finally have a meltdown? Oh, hell. Alice, I'm so grateful that you came today onto the show, that you could share your passion and your vision with me. One thing that we didn't say is you primarily work with women out there. So you mentioned that you have taken the odd gentleman on, but the problem, of course, is that there are different traumas and different ways of sharing in groups, and the dynamic completely changes when you've got a mixed group. So I very much understand that you prefer to work with women. So that's one caveat out there, guys. But then again, if you're a guy who's listening in and is getting peeved to say, you've got all these women on, there are actually men out there, and I've had a while ago, we've had a little series of men on. Unfortunately, when you go into groups of healers and people like us, and you sort of say hello, then unfortunately there are 90% women, I guess, and about 10% men. So, and it only shows that maybe the women are a little bit more advanced in wanting to do something about their situations and trying to find out what to do. So maybe we're a bit stuck in our own rut and our own worst enemies as men. It's a completely different story. So guys, if you're out there, go back to some interviews when I spoke to Jimmy Roos and to Mike and many other guys out there who might be of help to you. But this one is specifically for the girls. Okay, cool. So Alice, again, thank you so much for coming onto my show. I was humbled, I was honored, and you're a great guest.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
And you guys out there, live your life. You've got only one life to live. It's going to be fantastic. Just you do the work, you do the little steps, and you will not regret it. I promise you that. Look after yourself. Bye.